Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 6 of my ComputerCraft Challenge, and today we are going to be ignoring our responsibilities. We have a bunch of stuff that we should be doing, such as finishing up this farm and getting a tree farm going. I'm going to ignore all that because I really want to get started working on the text editor this episode. I'm going to be working on farming and running the farm in the background while I am making the text editor, but I really want to get this started. I know we're not going to get it finished today, but I figure as long as I'm sitting here working on it, then we'll have the farm going in the background and we can check on it periodically and keep it running. That way, in the next episode, we might actually be able to go get some cows and sheep set up, and we'll be that much closer to having everything that we need to continue surviving, and not just surviving, but thriving in this world. Going forward, we'll be probably doing every other episode, working a little bit on the text editor and working on stuff that we need to get done around the world. So it's not going to just be one or the other. We're actually going to do both and hopefully keep things moving at the same time as we're getting our text editor put together. This is going to be a long-term project. We're going to fill it out as best we can to start, and we can start using it in our turtles and for other programs that we want to make. And we will add functionality as we go. So as things come up, as we need them, we will add the functionality for that inside of our text editor. So for today, to start, I am going to just get a basic outline going. We really want to get some just basic boilerplate down and get to the point where we have the ability to take keyboard input for the text editor. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up and get some boilerplate down, and I will walk you through what we have. Alrighty guys, I've been working on this program now for about an hour and a half. So the program runs now, but it doesn't do much at the moment. You can see I've called it PEDIT. So if we run it, you can see this is it running. It's not really doing anything. All it's doing is waiting for events, but the only event that it can listen to right now is the terminate event. So let's go ahead and look at what we've got. Right down here, we're setting up the environment variables. We are getting the width and height of the terminal, checking whether or not the terminal is a color terminal, and setting running to true. If we go down here to the main loop, you can see while the loop is running, we're going to call this getEvent function and pass in the os.pullEventRaw arguments. So that is going to return any input event and the arguments associated with that. This getEvent function then separates that into the actual event and a table of the arguments. And if you come up here, you can see how it does that exactly. It just takes all those arguments. The first argument is the event argument, and then it creates an arguments table. And then for each argument that is passed to the function other than the event argument, it then assigns that to the arguments table. Then it returns the event and the argument table. So then down here, we're checking to see if the event exists in the event table. And if it does, then we're calling the function associated with that event and passing in the arguments. So the only function that exists in the event table right now is the terminate function. And all this is going to do is when the terminate event is passed to the event table, it is going to set running to false. So we will end the loop and exit the program. So that is the program loop running. The next step is to take the path data passed to the program through the command line and do some error checking to make sure that we have a valid path, or if the path doesn't exist, then we will create a file at the designated path. So I will get that working and we'll check back in when it's ready.
All right, I've been working on the path implementation for a little bit now, and I think I've got it working. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is checking to see if a file path was actually passed to the editor. And if there wasn't anything, then we are going to say that a file path is required and return to the shell. Then down here, we are assigning the argument that was passed into the command line to the path variable, the file path variable. And then we're separating out the directory name and the file name from this path variable. Then here we're creating this fdata table, which is the table that is going to be storing the file data that we are going to be working with. If the file path exists, then we will read the data from the file into this file table. Otherwise, this will be an empty table that we will then add whatever we want to while we're working on the project. Down here, we're checking to see if the directory is blank. And if it is, then we're assigning to the directory whatever directory we called the program from. So this shell directory, if we call it from the PASI users directory, then we don't actually have to put in users PASI file name. We can just say PEDIT file name inside the users directory, and this will assign that directory to the directory of the file path. This is the load file function. We're going to be taking in a path, creating a data table, opening the file, and reading each line from the file and inserting that into the data table, and then returning the data table. That's what we're doing down here. We're checking to see if the path exists. And if it does, then we will load that path, that file, into the data table. And everything else is the same. The next step is to actually display that file or to have a blank workbook that we can actually work with if we're creating a new file. So I will be back in just a minute to show you guys what I have for that. So I'm back, and here I've added a few more environment variables. We've now got the cursor position and the scroll amount. And if we come down here, you can see I've actually added a display function. Now, what this is doing is we are going from whatever line is going to be at the top of the screen to whatever line is going to be at the bottom of the screen and displaying that on the screen. So we're going from the Y scroll position. The Y scroll starts at 0 if we're starting from the top of the file. So line 1 plus the Y scroll is where we're starting. We're going to the height of the screen from the Y scroll position. And right here you can see we're checking to make sure we're not going past whatever the length of the data file is. And we're setting the cursor position and writing that line onto the screen. Then if we just come down here, you can see we are actually calling this display function on the fdata table, setting the cursor position to whatever the cursor position is. And then this is the cleanup for when we terminate. It's going to clear the screen on the shell and set the cursor position back to 1, 1. So I'll give a quick demonstration of that. We'll just PEDIT on PEDIT. So you can see that's what this is here. This is the PEDIT file, and you can see that it's actually displaying it. Now, there's no way to actually scroll or interact with the environment yet, so that is the next thing that we have to set up. I'll be back in just a minute to show you guys what I have for that. All right, so here we have the actual scroll implementation. I've added this line number and column number environment variable. So this is going to be the line and column that the cursor is on. The cursor position is the actual position of the cursor on the screen. The line and column number is the position of the cursor within the file. Right here, we've got this constrain cursor function. What this is doing is we're taking the maximum difference between the column number and the length of the string on that line. So this is basically giving us how far we need to shift the cursor over if we click outside of wherever. So you can see if I click on this, the cursor is put to the end of the line, and I'm mimicking that functionality in our editor, doing basically the same thing right here. So if the maximum difference is greater than 0, then the column number will become the column number subtracted from that difference. And the cursor also becomes the cursor subtracted from that difference. Then we're checking to see if the cursor is less than 1. And then if the cursor is less than 1, then we will actually scroll the screen back. So that way, if we have our X scroll is over here like this, and we were to click on an empty line, it's going to actually shift the scroll all the way back to the beginning. Or it'll shift it back to wherever the end of the line is. So I have this scroll function, which takes the coordinate that you want to scroll and the amount by which you want to scroll it. And we are creating a p scroll amount, which this is just being set to whatever the current scroll amount is. We're then adding the amount to the y scroll if we're in the y coordinate, or the x scroll if we're in the x coordinate. And then we are right here, we're checking to make sure that we're not outside of the file. So I don't want to be able to scroll past the end of the file. So what we're doing here is we're taking the minimum of whatever the length of the file is, subtracted from the height of the screen, and whatever the maximum of 0 and the y scroll is. So first, this maximum is going to return either 0 if y scroll is negative, or whatever the y scroll is if it's greater than 0. And then this is going to, the minimum is going to return either this if it's less than the end of the file, or the end of the file if the y scroll is past the end of the file. So that's how we check to make sure we're not scrolling past the end of the file. And then we're setting the cursor position to the cursor position plus however far we scrolled. So that's what this P scroll is for. Whatever our previous scroll amount was, subtract whatever the current scroll is, and add that to the current cursor position. And then we're doing the same thing for the X scroll. Right here we have this we have this mouse scroll implementation, so we can actually use the scroll wheel on the mouse. This is in the event table, so if we have a mouse scroll event, then we're just going to call this function, which will scroll the y coordinate. The targs that is passed is always going to be 1 or -1. That's the argument that the scroll event causes. And we're multiplying that by 5 because I want to actually scroll 5 lines every time I do the mouse scroll rather than just a single line. So you can actually see here, if I scroll with the mouse on this, it just scrolls a single line. And I actually have to scroll quite a bit to even get it to move anywhere. Now we have the mouse click event. And this is going to pass 3 arguments. So it's going to be which mouse button was clicked. So we're setting that to button, the X and the Y position of the mouse on the screen when it was clicked. So here we're going to check if button equals 1. So that's the left click. We're going to set the cursor position to the Y position of the mouse and the line number to the Y position plus the Y scroll, and the X position of the cursor to the X position of the mouse, and the column number to the X plus the Y scroll. Then we're going to call this constrain cursor function that I showed you at the top to get this functionality. And nothing else has changed. That was easily implemented just here inside the event table. And so I will give a quick demonstration of that, and then we will add the actual text input functionality. So again, I'll just call PEDIT on PEDIT. And now you can see we actually have the PEDIT file loaded into the editor. And now I can use the mouse scroll to move the file up and down. See, it's a lot faster scrolling through than with the normal editor. And I can go ahead and click. And anywhere I click, it is setting the cursor to that position. And if I click out here, it will set it to the end of the line. So that's that functionality. I will meet you right back here in just a minute with the actual character input functionality. All right, the character implementation is actually super easy and straightforward. All I have here is this character insert function, which takes a string and inserts a character into that string at the index and returns that new string. So if we come down here into the event table, when we receive a character event, if we press basically any key with a character on it, the character event will trigger. The event returns whatever character that was. So we save that to this character variable. And then we call the character insert function, passing in the line that we're on, the character, and the column number, because that is where the cursor is inside the file. And we're assigning the new string back to the file at that location. Then we're increasing the X position of the cursor by 1, increasing the column number by 1. And then if the cursor is past the end of the page, we're simply scrolling the page in that direction. And that is the entire cursor implementation. We're not doing anything else with that. So I will demonstrate that real quick. Go ahead and exit out of that. We'll do like we have been doing, PEDIT on PEDIT. So here we are inside this file. And if I go ahead and type, I can type whatever. I messed that up, but there's no backspace functionality yet because backspace isn't a character, and we'll have to implement that separately. That'll probably be the next thing we do. But you can see I can type in here, and if I get to the end of the screen, I can type whatever, and it just keeps scrolling as far this way as we want it to go. We go ahead and click like this to get back. There's also, I cannot use the arrow keys right now. There's no functionality for that. So the only way that I can actually scroll back is to click on an empty line. But that will be one of the next things we implement, actually the non-character key inputs. But for now, this is working. We can type whatever we want in here. And I'm gonna get going on the other key functionality. And one more thing that I didn't mention last time, I've got this program settings table now. So I'm going to have this accessible from the actual program. I don't yet, so we'll just have to edit these manually for now. But I'll probably leave them just how I have them. But just for completeness of the program, I want to add the ability to change the settings from inside the program from our menu when we are actually completing this program. So this controls basically how much the screen will scroll when we use the different scroll methods. The character scroll will be for when we're typing. So if we get to the end of the screen and we keep typing, it will currently scroll one character in every time we type. You could change it so that when you get to the end, it will scroll in 5, and then you type 1, 2, 3, 4 more, and you get to the end. The next one you type, it'll scroll over another 5. But I like just having it on 1 right now. And the arrow scroll, same thing. When we use the arrow keys to move around, it will actually only scroll over 1, and I believe that's the same way that this basic edit works. Yeah, it just scrolls over 1. And then the mouse scroll I have set to 5 so that when we're using the scroll wheel on the mouse, it will move up and down by 5 lines per scroll, not just 1. And that will be configurable from the menu. Now, if we come down here, I've added quite a bit for the excess key functionality. So if we come down here to the event table, you can see there's a single event function for key. So when there's a key event, it will call this function. It will pass in which key. We will take that key and check its name and assign that to this key variable. We will check to see if there's a function associated with that key in our key down funcs table. And then we will call that function from the key down funcs table. So I have that up here above the event table. We have the key function table. And currently in the key function table, we have the enter key, the backspace key, and the delete key. And that's all I've added so far. I am going to add the arrow keys here very soon. But I figured this is what we need really to actually make this program functionable. So right here with the enter key, we call this function. When we hit enter, it will call this split string function, which this function takes the string and the column number of, so wherever the cursor position is, and we'll split the string into two strings at that position. So we'll get these two strings back. And then I set the string 1 to that line that we're on. I call this new line function, which I'll go up in just a second and show you how that works. This will drop the cursor down a line, and we will insert a new line into the data table, the file table at that line number, and assign the second string to it. So this new line function right here, we will set cursor x and column num to 1. So it's going to drop down and go back to the very first position. Cursor y, we're going to drop down 1, and line num, we're going to drop down 1. And we're going to set the x scroll to 0. And then for this, we're checking if the cursor is less than the height. And so if it's not less than the height, that means we're off the screen. And if we're off the bottom, then we will actually scroll the screen up 1. And we could probably actually make this program settings dot char scroll, I think is what it is. Let's go up and look at that. Yeah, char scroll. So that way it will scroll however much the character scroll is. If we come down here to the backspace functionality, you can see we're actually checking first to make sure that the column number is greater than 1, so we're not all the way back at the end. And if it is, then we're going to move the cursor back 1 position and the column number back 1 position. And then we're going to call this character delete function, which is very similar to the character insert function, except for instead of inserting a character at that position, we're simply taking the string and the position, and we're removing the character from that position, and then returning the new string and assigning it back to the fdata table. Then if the cursor is less than 1, so if the cursor is off the side of the screen here, we will scroll the screen back. Now we have the special condition. So we're returning here. So we won't go into this if this happens. But if the column number is equal to 1, then if the line number is greater than 1, so we're not all the way at the top of the page, then what we're going to do is decrement the cursor, the Y position of the cursor by 1, and the line number by 1. So we're going up a line. And then we're going to figure out where we need to put the X cursor based on how long the line above the line that we were on. We're going to scroll to that position if we are off the screen. And then we will copy whatever was left on the bottom line onto the line that we're currently on. and remove the line that we were on from the table. So we're getting rid of that line and then putting the rest of whatever was on that line onto the line that we're on. So it has the effect of getting rid of the new line character at the end of the string. Now, if we come down here to the delete function, this is almost the same as the backspace, other than we don't move the cursor back at all, so it's a bit easier to implement. We're simply going to make sure that we're not the end of the string. And if we're not, then we will simply call the character delete from that position without moving back. And then if we are on the end of the line, then for this f data table at that line number, we will take the line that is below this line, if that line exists, and we will remove that line and copy whatever is on that line onto the line that we are currently sitting on. So I'll give a quick demonstration of how that works. And we will call PEDIT on PEDIT. And now you can see that we can type, we can use the backspace, and if we are at the end of the line here, it will actually backspace up to the next line and raise everything up. And we can hit delete, and it will delete everything in front of the cursor. And if we're at the end of the line, it will pull this up, just like that. And we can hit enter to drop down a line. So if we wanted to move this down a line, we can go ahead and put the cursor there, hit enter, it drops down a line. That is all the functionality that we have so far. I will add the arrow keys here very soon, and we'll be able to move around with that. But other than that, I'm going to add a save functionality, and we will be able to start using this to actually edit our files. But that is all we have for this episode today, guys. I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you in the next one.